The massive space station hung in the void like a twisted crown of metal and crystal. Ships from 12 different worlds floated around it, each one representing a species that ruled entire star systems. This was the heart of galactic power, where the strongest civilizations decided the fate of weaker ones. Ambassador Sarah Martinez walked through the long corridor with heavy steps. Her small human delegation followed behind her, their faces showing the weight of what was about to happen. The walls around them pulsed with alien technology that hurt to look at directly. Strange symbols moved across the surfaces like living things, speaking in languages that human minds could barely understand. They reached the main chamber, and Sarah had to stop herself from gasping. The room was enormous, reaching up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. 12 massive platforms floated in the air, each one holding a different alien being. Some looked like living machines made of silver and gold. Others were balls of pure energy that shifted colors constantly. A few appeared to be made of crystal that sang with musical notes when they moved. At the center of it all sat Zixthara, the current council speaker. Her body was made of flowing liquid metal that constantly changed shape. When she spoke, her voice echoed from everywhere at once, making it sound like thunder rolling through the chamber. "Humans of Earth," Zixthara began, her metal form shifting into something that might have been a smile. "You stand before the Galactic Council to receive our final judgment." Sarah stepped forward, trying to keep her voice steady. "We request the right to speak in our defense." A sound like laughter came from several of the floating platforms. One of the energy beings pulsed brighter. "Defense? What defense could your primitive species possibly offer?" Another council member, this one looking like a giant insect made of living crystal, clicked its mandibles together. "Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. Your ships use chemical rockets like children playing with firecrackers. Your people live for barely 100 years, not even long enough to gain true wisdom." Sarah felt her jaw clench, but she forced herself to remain calm. "We may be young, but we learn quickly. We adapt. We survive." "Survival is not enough," Zixthara replied, her metal body flowing into a new shape that towered over the humans. "The galaxy has no place for species that cannot contribute meaningfully to our civilization. You have proven yourselves to be nothing more than aggressive primitives who fight among yourselves and damage the worlds you touch." The human delegation exchanged glances. They had expected this, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. Earth had spent decades trying to earn a place in galactic society, only to be told they were not wanted. "What are your terms?" Sarah asked. Knowing she would not like the answer, the crystal insect leaned forward on its platform. "You will withdraw from all systems beyond your home sector within 30 standard cycles. All human colonies, research stations, and military outposts will be abandoned. You will restrict yourselves to your solar system and make no further attempts to expand into galactic space." "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The energy being that had laughed earlier pulsed with angry red light. "Then we will remove you ourselves. Your crude weapons and simple shields would not protect you for even a day against our combined fleets." Sarah looked up at the 12 alien rulers floating above her. Each one represented civilizations that had existed for millions of years, technologies that could reshape matter itself, and military forces that could destroy entire star systems. Humanity had built its first spaceship less than a century ago. The math was not difficult to understand. "We accept your terms," she said finally, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. Zixthara's metal form rippled with satisfaction. "Wise. You have proven that your species at least has some capacity for logic, even if you lack everything else necessary for galactic citizenship." As the human delegation turned to leave, Sarah heard the council members talking among themselves. Their voices carried clearly through the chamber, and she knew they intended for her to hear. "Another failed species," one of them said. "At least they accepted reality quickly." "Their home system is rich in certain metals," another added. "Perhaps in a few thousand years, when they have died out, we can make use of their worlds." "If they last that long," Zixthara commented with what sounded like amusement. "Most primitive species destroy themselves within a few centuries of achieving spaceflight." Sarah kept walking, her back straight and her expression controlled. Behind her, she could hear her fellow humans struggling to maintain their composure. General Harrison's face was red with anger, while Dr. Kim looked like she was about to cry. They boarded their ship in silence. The vessel was small compared to the alien craft around them, built with Earth's best technology but still appearing crude and simple next to the flowing, impossible designs of the Council fleets. As they prepared to depart, Sarah looked out the window one last time at the space station that had just declared humanity unworthy of existence. "Ma'am," the pilot said softly, "we're receiving clearance to depart." "Take us home," Sarah replied. The ship pulled away from the station and began its journey back toward human space. As they traveled, Sarah noticed something strange on the sensor readings. There was an energy signature near Jupiter that did not match any known human technology. It appeared for just a few seconds before vanishing completely. "What was that?" she asked the sensor operator. The young officer frowned at his screen. "I'm not sure, ma'am. The computer says it was just solar interference, but the pattern looked almost artificial." Sarah stared at the readings for a long moment. Something was not right about this, but she could not put her finger on what it was. The signature had appeared and disappeared too quickly for proper analysis. Behind them, the Council station grew smaller in the distance. The alien rulers had already forgotten about the humans, moving on to more important matters like trade disputes between star systems and territorial negotiations that involved billions of lives. To them, humanity was just another problem solved, another primitive species put in its proper place. But as their ship jumped into hyperspace, heading back toward Earth with news of their exile, Sarah could not shake the feeling that something important had just happened. The energy signature near Jupiter stayed in her mind, a puzzle piece that did not fit with anything she knew about human technology. In the depths of space, something ancient stirred. Something that had been waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right desperate species to find it. The Council had made their decision about humanity, based on what they could see and measure. They had no way of knowing about the things that hid in dark corners of the universe, waiting for someone worthy of their attention. The journey home would take several days, giving Sarah time to prepare her report for Earth's leaders. She would have to tell them that humanity's dreams of joining galactic civilization were over, before they had truly begun. She would have to explain that Earth was now alone again, cut off from the greater universe by beings who saw them as nothing more than clever animals. But deep down, something told her that this was not the end of the story. This was just the beginning. The ship disappeared into the swirling colors of hyperspace, carrying its passengers toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the Council members continued their business, confident that they had solved another minor problem. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the cargo ship New Horizon, watching the last human colony ship disappear into hyperspace. Around her, the Kepler 442 system was emptying of human presence. What had once been a thriving research outpost with 3 million colonists was now just abandoned buildings and empty space docks. "That's the last civilian transport," her first officer reported. "All non-essential personnel have been evacuated." Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the Council observation ship hanging in the distance. The alien vessel looked like a massive flower made of metal petals, each one covered in sensors that tracked every human movement. She knew they were watching, recording everything, making sure humanity followed the Council's orders exactly. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message from Admiral Torres. He wants to speak with you privately." Sarah walked to her quarters and activated the secure communication system. Admiral Torres appeared on the screen, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few weeks. Behind him, she could see the bridge of his flagship, the Defiance. "Sarah," he said without introduction, "I need you to make a detour on your way home. There are some materials we need to collect from the research station on Kepler 4422c before we leave." "Sir, the Council ships are watching everything. If we deviate from the approved evacuation routes, they won't detect what we're really doing," Torres interrupted. "Dr. Webb's team has developed new stealth technology. Trust me on this." Sarah studied the Admiral's face. She had served under him for 15 years and had never known him to take unnecessary risks. If he was asking her to do this, it was important. "What kind of materials are we collecting?" she asked. "Samples from the dig site, and some equipment that, well, let's just say it doesn't appear on any official inventory." An hour later, Sarah's ship approached the research station on the third planet. The world looked dead from orbit, its surface covered in the geometric patterns of abandoned human settlements. But as they descended through the atmosphere, she noticed something strange. Some of the buildings were still powered, their lights glowing softly in the twilight. Dr. Marcus Webb was waiting for them at the landing pad. He was a thin man with gray hair and intense eyes that seemed to look right through people. Sarah had met him a few times at scientific conferences, but she had never paid much attention to his work on what he called theoretical physics applications. "Captain Chen," he greeted her as she stepped off the ship. "Thank you for coming. We have very little time." He led her toward a building that looked different from the others. While most of the colony structures were built with standard human materials, this one seemed to be made of something that shifted color in the light. It hurt her eyes to look at it directly. "What is this place?" she asked. "A laboratory," Webb replied. "We've been working here for the past 3 years on a project that the Council doesn't know about." Inside the building, Sarah saw equipment that looked nothing like human technology. Strange devices hummed with energy that made her skin tingle. Crystals floated in mid-air, rotating slowly while emitting soft light. Computer screens showed equations that seemed to move and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Dr. Webb," she said carefully, "what exactly have you been doing here?" Webb smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "We found something, Captain. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about physics, about space, about what's possible." He led her to a vault in the center of the laboratory. Inside, floating in a field of blue energy, was a small object that looked like a piece of twisted metal. But as Sarah watched, it seemed to fold in on itself, existing in dimensions that her brain couldn't properly process. "We found this buried beneath the colony site," Webb explained. "It's not from any known civilization. Our best estimate is that it's at least 1 billion years old, possibly much older." "What does it do?" "It teaches," Webb said simply. "When we learned how to interface with it properly, it began showing us things. Mathematical principles that allow matter to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy manipulation techniques that make fusion power look like rubbing sticks together. Space-time engineering that makes hyperspace travel seem primitive." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "The Council has no idea any of this exists," Webb finished. "And we intend to keep it that way." Over the next hour, Webb's team loaded several containers onto Sarah's ship. The containers were sealed with technology she didn't recognize and seemed to weigh nothing despite their size. As they worked, Webb explained what had been happening during the evacuation. "This isn't the only site," he told her. "We found similar artifacts on 7 different worlds. Always buried deep, always hidden, always waiting for someone to discover them. It's like someone left them for us to find. Someone. We don't know who. The artifacts are older than any known civilization. Whoever made them disappeared long before the Council species even existed." As they prepared to leave, Webb handed Sarah a small device that looked like a combination of crystal and metal. "This will let you communicate with us securely. The signal uses principles that Council technology can't detect or intercept. Us. The people who are going to make sure humanity has a future," Webb said. "The Council thinks they've won, but they've actually given us the greatest gift possible. Time and privacy to learn what we need to learn." Sarah's ship lifted off from the planet, carrying its mysterious cargo toward the edge of human space. As they traveled, she noticed other ships moving through the system on courses that didn't match the official evacuation routes. Some were heading toward asteroid fields where no colonies had ever existed. Others were approaching gas giants where the sensor readings showed impossible energy signatures. "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "I'm detecting some very unusual activity throughout the system. Ships that aren't on our evacuation lists, energy readings that don't match any known human technology." Sarah nodded but said nothing. She was beginning to understand that the withdrawal from Council space was not what it appeared to be. While the aliens watched the obvious movements of civilian transports and military vessels, something else was happening in the shadows. 3 days later, they reached the edge of human space. The journey had been tense, with Council ships following them at a distance and scanning them repeatedly. But the stealth technology Webb had mentioned seemed to work perfectly. The aliens detected nothing unusual about the cargo they were carrying. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Sarah received a final message from Admiral Torres. "Phase 1 complete," was all it said. She looked out at the stars that now formed the boundary of humanity's prison. The Council had banished them to their home system, confident that they were removing a threat before it could grow dangerous. They had watched the evacuation with smug satisfaction, seeing only a defeated species retreating in shame. But Sarah now knew the truth. The withdrawal had been carefully planned and coordinated. While the council focused on the obvious movements, teams of humans had been collecting something far more valuable than territory or resources. They had been gathering knowledge that could change everything. In the months that followed, the stream of refugee ships continued. Each one carried civilians fleeing the abandoned colonies, but many also carried scientists, engineers, and mysterious cargo containers that never appeared on any official manifest. The Council's observation ships dutifully recorded the exodus, noting the apparent desperation and chaos of humanity's retreat. By the time the last human ship crossed into home system space, the Council had already lost interest. The primitives had been dealt with, the threat removed, and galactic civilization could continue without interference from aggressive newcomers. But in the hidden laboratories of Earth and the secret facilities being built in the outer reaches of the solar system, work was beginning on projects that would have terrified the Council if they had known. The artifacts were revealing their secrets slowly, teaching humanity about technologies that transcended the laws of physics as they understood them. The Council had sneered as the humans left, confident in their superiority and their decision to exile a troublesome species. They had no idea that they had just given humanity exactly what it needed to become something the galaxy had never seen before. The withdrawal was complete, but it was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since the humans were exiled to their home system, and the Galactic Council had almost forgotten they existed. In the great chamber where 12 species once debated humanity's fate, the conversation now focused on more important matters. Zixthera shifted her liquid metal form as she addressed the assembly. The crystalline dominion's expansion into Sector 7 has exceeded projections by 12%. Their new mining operations are extracting resources faster than any previous civilization. The crystal being that represented the Dominion sang a note of satisfaction. Our efficiency improvements continue to evolve. Unlike some species, we understand the value of patience and proper development. Across the chamber, the Energy Consortium's representative pulsed with annoyed yellow light. Your mining disrupts the natural energy flows of those systems. We have filed formal complaints about the dimensional interference. The Machine Collective's speaker, a complex arrangement of geometric shapes that constantly reconfigured itself, emitted a series of calculated tones. Philosophical question: does efficiency justify environmental disruption? Analyzing probability matrices suggests long-term negative consequences. As the debate continued, a junior council member mentioned receiving routine reports from their monitoring stations near human space. The reports indicated normal activity: trade ships moving between planets, construction projects, the typical signs of a species rebuilding after forced relocation. Should we increase surveillance? The junior member asked. Zixthera's form rippled with something like amusement. Why waste resources monitoring primitives? They are contained in their little corner of space, playing with their chemical rockets and short lives. Let them recover their pride in isolation. The Council moved on to discuss territorial disputes between the Thermal Confederation and the Quantum Collective, matters that affected billions of beings across thousands of star systems. Humanity was a footnote in galactic history, a problem that had been solved years ago, but in the depths of human space, extraordinary events were unfolding in absolute secrecy. Dr. Marcus Webb floated in zero gravity inside a laboratory that existed partially outside normal space-time. The facility orbited Luna, but it was hidden in what the artifacts had taught them to call folded space. A pocket dimension that occupied the same location as normal reality but remained completely invisible to outside observers. Around him, dozens of scientists from every human world worked with technologies that would have been impossible just 5 years earlier. Crystals that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously powered computers that could process information faster than light. Materials that phased in and out of reality were shaped into tools that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Dr. Webb, called Sarah Chen, who was no longer a ship captain, but rather the director of the Artifact Integration Project. We're ready for the next phase of Luna base reconstruction. Webb turned to look at the massive holographic display that showed the moon's interior. What the surface telescopes saw was the same old Luna that humans had known for centuries, but beneath the surface, in caverns that folded through dimensions the human mind could barely comprehend, the real work was happening. The lunar artifacts are fully active now, Webb reported to the assembled team. They've revealed construction techniques that make it possible to build structures that exist in multiple realities simultaneously. We can expand our facilities infinitely without changing Luna's external appearance by even a millimeter. Admiral Torres, now bearing cybernetic implants that allowed his brain to interface directly with artifact technology, nodded from his position near the command center. And our timeline for the fleet upgrades? 6 months for the first prototype, Webb replied. The artifacts are teaching us to build ships that don't travel through space. They reorganize space around themselves. Distance becomes meaningless when you can simply fold the universe. On Earth, similar projects were advancing at an incredible pace. The artifact discovered beneath the ruins of ancient Babylon had revealed the secrets of biological enhancement, teaching human scientists to rewrite genetic code in ways that extended lifespans indefinitely and expanded mental capacity beyond anything previously imagined. Dr. Kim Martinez, the former ambassador's daughter, who had become one of the leading researchers in bioengineering, stood in her laboratory looking at the latest test results. We're seeing cognitive improvements of over 800% in the volunteer subjects, she reported to her team. Memory enhancement, processing speed, pattern recognition, all far beyond normal human ranges. Any negative side effects? Asked her assistant. None detected. The artifacts seem to understand biological systems better than we understand ourselves. They're not just teaching us to modify human biology, they're showing us how to perfect it. In the asteroid belt, mining operations that appeared routine to long-range sensors were actually extracting materials that existed in quantum superposition. These substances could be used to build technologies that operated according to principles the Council species had never discovered. Entire fleets of ships were being constructed using matter that was simultaneously solid and energy. Real and virtual. Captain Williams, formerly a cargo hauler, now commanded a construction facility that existed in 17 different dimensions. The new hulls are complete, he reported during the weekly coordination meeting. These ships can phase through solid matter, absorb energy attacks by converting them to raw materials, and travel by reorganizing local space-time. How many? Asked Torres. 350 completed, with production increasing exponentially. The artifact fabrication systems don't follow normal manufacturing limitations. They seem to create matter from pure information. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in the deep space laboratories hidden in the outer system. There, teams of enhanced humans were learning to communicate with intelligences that existed beyond physical reality. The artifacts, it turned out, were not just tools left behind by an ancient civilization. They were contact points with beings that had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. Dr. Elizabeth Reese, whose consciousness now operated partially outside linear time, served as the primary interface with these entities. They've been waiting, she explained during a briefing that was transmitted simultaneously across all human facilities. Waiting for a species that was capable of growth, of change, of becoming something more than what they were born to be. What do they want from us? Webb asked. Partnership, Reese replied. They've watched the galaxy for eons, seen civilization after civilization reach a certain level and then stagnate. The Council species represent the end result of that stagnation. Powerful but limited, advanced but incapable of true evolution. And humanity? We're different. We adapt, we grow. We refuse to accept limitations. That's why they chose us. The communications came through quantum entanglement networks that operated outside normal space, allowing instantaneous contact across any distance. Human colonies throughout the solar system were connected by information systems that made the Council's fastest communications look like smoke signals. On Mars, terraforming projects were advancing using technologies that could restructure planetary atmospheres in months, rather than centuries. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, research stations were discovering that the gas giants themselves were vast repositories of exotic matter that could be harvested using dimensional manipulation techniques. Throughout all of this, the monitoring systems that watched human space from the Council's border stations detected nothing unusual. The activities were hidden not just by stealth technology, but by existing in spaces that Council sensors couldn't even perceive. To their instruments, humanity appeared to be slowly rebuilding their civilization with the same primitive methods they had always used. The Council's intelligence reports continued to describe a defeated species working to recover from their humiliation. Trade between human worlds was increasing slowly. Construction projects showed gradual technological improvement. Population growth remained stable. Nothing suggested that the humans were developing capabilities beyond their demonstrated level. In the council chambers, when humanity was mentioned at all, it was with the same dismissive attitude that had characterized their exile. Still contained, the report stated. No unusual activity detected. Threat level remains minimal. But as the 5th anniversary of the exile approached, changes were accelerating beyond what even the enhanced humans could have predicted. The artifacts were revealing their final secrets, teaching humanity not just to transcend physical limitations, but to exist across multiple realities simultaneously. The time of hiding was almost over. Soon humanity would be ready to return to galactic space, but not as the primitive species that had been banished 5 years earlier. They would return as something the Council could never have imagined, something that would fundamentally change the nature of existence itself. The Council continued their debates about mining rights and territorial disputes, completely unaware that the greatest transformation in galactic history was taking place in the small corner of space they had forgotten about. They had no idea what was coming. The first sign of trouble came from a crystalline Dominion mining operation in the Vega system. Controller Zethkar was reviewing production reports when his assistant's harmonic frequency suddenly shifted to panic. "Controller, we're detecting unknown vessels approaching the mining platform," the assistant sang in urgent tones. Zethkar's crystalline structure rotated toward the sensor displays. "Unknown? Run identification protocols. This is restricted space. Sir, the vessels, they just appeared. No hyperspace entry signature. No dimensional gateway activity. They simply materialized 3 kilometers from our position." Zethkar's crystal body rang with disbelief. "Impossible. Display visual feed." The main screen showed 3 ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were sleek and white, with surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Energy patterns ran along their hulls in designs that hurt to look at directly, geometric forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. "Transmit standard challenge protocols," Zethkar ordered. "All frequencies." The response came immediately, but not through communication systems. Instead, words appeared directly in Zethkar's consciousness, bypassing his audio sensors entirely. "Crystalline Dominion vessel. You are mining in space that will soon be needed for other purposes. Evacuate this system within 1 standard hour." "Who are you?" Zethkar demanded, his crystalline form flashing with angry light. "We are human," came the reply, and suddenly Zethkar's memory cores identified the impossible. These were the primitives who had been exiled 5 years ago. But the ships bore no resemblance to the crude chemical rockets that had limped away from Council space. "Humans possess no technology capable of this," Zethkar stated. "Identify yourselves properly." Instead of answering, one of the human ships began to move toward the mining platform, but it did not travel through space in any recognizable way. Instead, space itself seemed to fold around the vessel, bringing it closer without the ship actually moving at all. Zethkar activated his defense systems. Plasma cannons capable of melting asteroids targeted the approaching ship and fired. The energy beams struck the human vessel directly and simply passed through it as if it were not there. "Defensive systems ineffective," his assistant reported in tones of pure confusion. "Target appears to be phasing in and out of normal space-time." The human ship came to rest directly beside the mining platform, close enough that Zethkar could see figures moving behind transparent sections of the hull. They looked like humans, but something was different about them. Their movements were too fluid, too precise, as if they existed partially outside the normal flow of time. "You have 58 minutes remaining," the voice said in his mind. "Use that time wisely." Zethkar immediately transmitted an emergency alert to the Dominion fleet. Within minutes, 12 heavy cruisers jumped into the system, their crystal hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The fleet commander, Admiral Vexthon, took control of the situation. "Unknown vessels, you are in violation of crystalline Dominion territory." Vexthon broadcast on all frequencies. "Surrender immediately or face destruction." The 3 human ships remained motionless. Then, slowly, 9 more appeared around them. Not arriving from hyperspace, not uncloaking, simply coming into existence as if they had always been there. Admiral, one of Vexthon's sensor operators reported, the unknown vessels are generating energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Quantum structure appears to be unstable. They seem to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Vexthon made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his existence. All ships open fire. Destroy the intruders. 12 Dominion cruisers unleashed enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Energy beams, quantum torpedoes, and gravitational disruptors filled the space around the human ships with destructive force that could tear apart the fabric of reality itself. The human vessels absorbed every attack. Not deflected, not blocked, absorbed. The energy strikes simply disappeared into their hulls, and moments later, new human ships began materializing throughout the system. Each one was constructed from the matter and energy of the Dominion's own weapons. Impossible, Vexthon whispered, his crystal structure dimming with shock. A new voice entered the communications network, speaking with authority that transcended normal rank. This is Admiral Torres of the Human Defense Force. Crystalline Dominion vessels, you are outmatched. Withdraw from this system and no harm will come to you. Vexthon's tactical systems identified the speaker as the human military leader who had overseen their species' exile 5 years earlier, but the energy signature coming from his ship suggested that he was no longer entirely human. You were exiled, Vexthon transmitted. You were defeated. Your species was deemed unworthy. We left, Torres replied calmly. We learned. We evolved. The Council wanted us gone, so we became something they could never have imagined. Now we have returned, not as supplicants seeking membership, but as something far beyond your understanding. To demonstrate his point, Torres's ship moved directly toward the largest Dominion cruiser. Vexthon ordered his vessel to ram the approaching human ship. But as the two vessels came together, the Dominion cruiser simply passed through the human ship as if it were made of light. A moment later, every system on Vexthon's ship began shutting down. Life support, weapons, engines, even the emergency systems, all of them simply stopped working. But instead of dying, the crew found that they no longer needed air to breathe or gravity to function. The human technology was somehow sustaining them while demonstrating its complete control over their vessel. Your time is ending, Torres announced, his words reaching every ship in the system simultaneously, not through destruction but through obsolescence. We offer you the same choice we will offer every species in the galaxy. Evolve or become irrelevant. The Dominion ships tried to retreat, but their hyperspace drives no longer functioned. They were trapped in a system where the laws of physics seemed to have been rewritten by beings who understood reality at a level they could not comprehend. Within hours, similar encounters were occurring throughout Council space. Human ships appeared simultaneously in dozens of systems, always offering the same choice: evolve or become irrelevant. They made no aggressive moves, fired no weapons, threatened no violence. They simply demonstrated technologies that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. In the Council chambers, panic spread as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Energy Consortium's representative flickered with terrified patterns of light. 17 of our collection stations have been visited by human vessels. They are offering to teach our people energy manipulation techniques that make our current methods obsolete. The Machine Collective's speaker struggled to process the information coming from its networks. Impossible data streams detected. Human technology appears to operate on principles that violate fundamental logical constraints. They are transmitting information faster than causality should allow. Zixthera's liquid metal form writhed with confusion and fear. How? How could they have developed such capabilities? Our intelligence networks detected nothing. Because you were looking in the wrong dimensions, came a new voice. The Council members turned to see a figure materializing in the center of their chamber. It was clearly human in origin, but changed in ways that their minds struggled to comprehend. The being appeared to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously, sometimes appearing as a young woman, sometimes as an elderly man, sometimes as patterns of pure information. I am Dr. Elizabeth Reese, the figure announced. I speak for humanity and for intelligences that transcended physical existence long before your civilizations learned to make fire. Zixthara flowed into an aggressive configuration. Guards, destroy this intruder! The Council's security systems activated, filling the chamber with energy fields designed to contain or eliminate any possible threat. The human figure remained unaffected, existing somehow between the energy beams rather than being touched by them. Your weapons cannot harm something that exists partially outside your reality, Reese explained patiently. We are no longer limited by the physical constraints that bind you. We have learned to exist across multiple dimensions, multiple timelines, multiple states of being. What do you want? Zixathera demanded. To offer you the same gift we offer every species, Reese replied. The chance to evolve beyond your current limitations. To become something greater than what you are. Around the chamber, the council members recoiled from the implications. We are already perfected, the crystal insect declared. Our civilizations have achieved the ultimate expression of our racial potential. Reese's expression shifted to something that might have been sadness. That is exactly your problem. You have convinced yourselves that you cannot grow further, so you have stopped growing. You have reached the limits of your imagination and called it perfection. And you have not? The Energy Consortium's representative pulsed. We have learned that there are no limits, Reese answered. Every boundary can be transcended. Every impossibility can become possible. The beings who taught us this achieved existence beyond physical reality, millions of years ago. They have been waiting for a species capable of join 3 weeks after the first human ships reappeared in council space. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The transformation was not violent or destructive, it was simply inevitable, like water flowing downhill or stars burning in the void. In the Proxima Centauri system, former subjects of the Thermal Confederation gathered around human teaching vessels that existed partially in other dimensions. Dr. Sarah Kim, her consciousness now enhanced to process information across multiple timelines simultaneously, addressed a crowd of beings whose species had never been allowed to advance beyond basic industrial technology. Energy is not separate from matter, she explained, her words translating automatically into thousands of languages and mental patterns. They are different expressions of the same fundamental reality. When you understand this truly, you can convert one to the other at will. She demonstrated by reaching into the quantum foam that surrounded all matter and drawing forth a perfect crystal of pure carbon, assembled from the ambient energy of space itself. The watching aliens gasped in wonder as she continued to create objects from nothing, showing them that the limitations they had accepted for millennia were merely illusions. But the Confederation told us this was impossible, one of the observers said, a being of living flame whose people had been used as living energy sources for thousands of years. The Confederation told you what they believed, Dr. Kim replied gently. They had reached the limits of their understanding and assumed those limits applied to everyone. We are here to show you that there are no real limits, only boundaries you choose to accept. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On worlds that had been strip-mined for resources, humans were teaching former slaves to reshape matter at the molecular level, turning barren rock into fertile soil and poisoned atmospheres into breathable air. Species that had been conquered and controlled for generations were learning to transcend physical limitations entirely. The results were predictable. Within days, entire populations were abandoning their former masters. The lower castes of council society, who had been content to serve more advanced species, suddenly found themselves capable of achievements that surpassed their former rulers. They no longer needed the technology, the resources, or the protection that the council provided. In the council chambers, panic had given way to a deeper horror, the realization that they were becoming irrelevant. Zixathera's liquid metal form had lost much of its luster as she addressed the emergency session. Around her, only 7 of the original 12 council members remained. The others had either fled to distant galaxies or locked themselves in their home systems, refusing to acknowledge what was happening. The Thermal Confederation reports that 87% of their subject species have abandoned their territories, she announced. The Energy Consortium has lost control of their collection networks entirely. Even our own service castes are refusing to follow orders. The crystal insect that represented the Dominion clicked its mandibles in distress. How can this be legal? We conquered those worlds fairly. They belong to us by right of superior force. Superior force, repeated the machine collective's speaker with what might have been bitter amusement. Computing new data. Force is irrelevant when subjects can phase out of reality to avoid it. Previous conquest models no longer apply to current conditions. A new report came in from the outer systems. The humans have established what they call transcendence centers on over 3,000 worlds, the communications officer announced. Any being who enters these centers emerges with capabilities that exceed our best technology. What kind of capabilities? Zixthara demanded. Complete matter manipulation, energy to mass conversion, dimensional travel, telepathic communication across unlimited distances, and biological immortality. The chamber fell silent. The council species had spent millions of years developing technologies that could extend life and enhance abilities, but they had never achieved true transcendence of physical limitations. The humans were offering in weeks what the council had failed to achieve in eons. "We must negotiate," declared the Energy Consortium's representative. "Surely we can reach some accommodation that preserves our authority." "With what leverage?" asked the Machine Collective. "They require nothing we possess. They offer everything we cannot match. Standard negotiation parameters are meaningless." As if summoned by their desperation, a human figure materialized in the chamber. This time it was Admiral Torres, but he had changed even more dramatically than Dr. Reese. His form existed across multiple dimensional states, sometimes appearing as the weathered military officer they remembered, sometimes as patterns of living light, sometimes as geometric structures that their minds could not properly process. "Council members," he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "You seem distressed." Zixthara flowed into what she hoped was a diplomatic configuration. "Admiral Torres, we wish to discuss terms. Surely there is room for cooperation between our species." Torres's expression shifted across several emotional states simultaneously, before settling on something that might have been sympathy. "You still think in terms of negotiations between separate powers. You do not understand what is happening." "Then explain it to us," the crystal insect demanded. "We are not conquering your territory," Torres said patiently. "We are not enslaving your people or destroying your civilizations. We are offering everyone in the galaxy the chance to become what we have become. The only thing that is being destroyed is the concept of limitation itself." "But what about our achievements?" Zixthara asked. "Our civilizations have stood for millions of years. We have built wonders that span star systems. Are all of our accomplishments meaningless?" "Not meaningless," Torres replied, "but primitive. You built within the constraints you believed were absolute. We have learned that those constraints do not exist. Everything you have achieved can be done better, faster, and with no cost in resources or suffering." He gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, showing them a view of the galaxy that no sensor had ever captured. They could see the transcendence centers spreading like points of light across thousands of worlds. Each center was surrounded by populations that were rapidly evolving beyond anything the Council had thought possible. "Watch," Torres said. They saw a world that had been strip-mined to bedrock by Dominion operations. Humans were working with the former slave population, teaching them to reach into quantum dimensions and extract the raw materials needed to rebuild their planet. Within hours, dead soil became fertile ground. Within days, entire ecosystems were restored to greater health than they had possessed before mining began. On another world, species that had been locked in biological stasis by Council technology were learning to modify their own genetic structure. Beings that had been bred for manual labor were becoming transcendent entities capable of reshaping reality through pure thought. "Your subjects do not need you anymore," Torres explained. "They do not need your technology, your resources, your protection, or your guidance. They are becoming something that makes your greatest achievements look like children playing with mud." "So what happens to us?" the Machine Collective asked, its calculations struggling to process a future without hierarchy. "You choose," Torres answered. "You can learn to transcend your limitations as we have done, as your former subjects are doing. Or you can remain what you are and watch the galaxy move beyond your understanding. And if we refuse, then you will be alone, not destroyed, not imprisoned, simply obsolete. Like a calculation engine in an age of quantum consciousness, or a chemical rocket in an era of dimensional travel." Zixthara's form shuddered as she contemplated the implications. "You are offering to teach us as well?" "Of course," Torres replied. "We offer this gift to every sentient being in the galaxy. The intelligences that taught us transcendence do not discriminate. They believe that consciousness itself is sacred, regardless of the form it takes." "But why?" she asked. "After what we did to you? After we exiled you and called you unworthy?" Torres's expression became almost gentle. Because you gave us the greatest gift possible. You forced us to leave the comfortable confines of known space and discover who we really were. You pushed us beyond our limitations by refusing to accept us as we were. Without your rejection, we might never have found the path to transcendence. Around the chamber, the remaining council members struggled to process this reversal of everything they thought they understood. They had seen themselves as the pinnacle of galactic evolution, the final authority on what was possible. Now they were being told that they were merely the first step in a journey they could not even imagine. The age of the council is ending, Torres continued, but it does not have to end in defeat or despair. It can end in transformation. You can become part of something greater than anything you built in your millions of years of rule. He began to fade from the chamber, but his final words echoed in their minds. The choice is yours. Evolve or become irrelevant, but choose quickly. The galaxy is not waiting for your decision. In the weeks that followed, the transformation accelerated beyond all prediction. Entire civilizations abandoned their former limitations, ending them.